In 1886, Carl Benz applied for a patent for the first ever vehicle with a gas-powered engine. Fast forward over 130 years and we're stood next to another Mercedes with a 1886 badge on it. Does that mean that Mercedes seem to think that this vehicle is a revolutionary vehicle that's worthy of having that date on it? Or is this just an evolution, something for them to be able to put a foot into the electric vehicle market? Let's have a look around and find out. This video is sponsored by Just EVs, a family-run company with the largest selection of battery electric vehicles available with free UK delivery. They now also offer EV rentals. Have a look at justevs.co.uk and don't forget to mention EV Opinion for a free annual service. Morning and welcome to the Mercedes EQC 400 4MATIC. Bit of a mouthful, I know, but this is Mercedes' proper entry into the electric vehicle market. And it's a car that I have read loads about and I've seen lots of videos about, and I'm almost at the stage where I'm afraid to test drive it because they have been overwhelmingly positive. So I want to have a good look around this and try and look at it from an objective point of view and see whether this is really a good entry into the market for Mercedes. And I wanted to start here at the front because this is the range-topping 1886. This car currently retails at just under £80,000. The range itself starts at about £65,000 and works its way up to this one. Across the range you will see some subtle differences both inside and outside, but the underpinnings of this car, your batteries, your motors, everything that this car sits on is exactly the same across the range. So although you'll see some flash stuff in here because this is the range topping model, it effectively sits on exactly the same platform as every other car in the range. And that brings me to the nose. For me, this was the one part of the car that I looked at in pictures and on videos that I really didn't like. And I think it comes from, we see it a lot across electric cars, because you don't actually have to have a grille on them anymore to allow the air in to keep the engine cool. Well, electric cars can do something different with the front. And what they seem to have done so far is just put a big slab of plastic across it just to show it's an electric car. And I think that just looks a bit unfinished and a bit rubbish, if I'm honest. And I thought that's what this one had on it. Now, if you look across the range, certainly if you look at the AMG ones, you'll see that there's some strips of metal or chrome look across the front of the grille. And I think that breaks it up and it doesn't give you this big slab at the front of the vehicle. But that said, actually stood next to this and seeing it in person, what I've realised is this is almost like a grille. So these are all little bars that go across, and it does break the front up, and it doesn't look anywhere near as bad in the flesh as it does on the videos and in pictures. So that was a real pleasant surprise for me. And I love some of this lighting on here. These strips that, if it was at night, would light up right across the bonnet. It looks a bit futuristic, doesn't it? It does look a little bit different. That said, this whole car is based on the Mercedes GLC platform. So yes, they've done an awful lot of work to it, and don't get me wrong, this isn't a GLC, but you'll see as we go round, there's some little bits to it that come from the GLC that we don't really want to see on an electric vehicle, but they're here anyway. But don't let that put you off. Let's keep looking around the vehicle. On the side here, well, it is very much an SUV, isn't it? It's quite squat actually, and I think they've been very clever with their styling here because this side panel, it comes out to a lip here, which almost brings the whole thing down. It makes it a lot shallower. These running boards here, well, they're not on all of them, but again, it brings everything together. It makes it look shorter and squatter and not the big lumbersome, potentially SUV it could be. Also on here, we see the 20-inch 10-spoke alloy wheels. They are not a standard option. They do come on this one as standard, but you won't find those across the range. You will find smaller wheels on some of the other ones. I've heard varying reports. I understand that the smaller wheels will give it a more comfortable ride, but we'll get to the test drive in a bit. And the other thing you'll notice on here is where we have our filling cap for our petrol or diesel vehicle. On here, we've got our charge point. On first inspection, you'll see that this probably looks much like any other CCS charger. But what I love about this, and these are the little touches that make all the difference. Normally you'd see a rubbery cap that you pull off and it dangles down. In here you don't get that at all. You get these lovely flaps that just open one at a time and keep everything out of the way, and it's not fouling the paintwork. As I said, CCS, this charges at 110 kilowatts if you can find a charger that will go that fast. So you will get a proper rapid charge out of this. And finally around the back. And I think the styling on the back of this car is possibly a little bland. And I think it's saved by this strip again. At night, you'll see all of this lights up across the back of the car. And I think that just brings everything together. But other than that, you have to say the quality, you just feel this paintwork and you look at it, it's so much better than an awful lot of other cars I've seen recently. But you know, I think they could have maybe done a little bit of a better job on here. I'm told that to open the boot, I can put my foot under here somewhere. I've just been stood here for 5 minutes. I can't make it work. There's obviously something I need to do and I don't know what. But what is nice is there's no buttons or anything. You just simply move the Mercedes badge and the boot opens on its own. And this boot it's a decent size. It's 500 litres. You've got a nice boot that you're able just to slide things in and out. It's all at the same level. And then under here, you've got another section where you can put all your electric vehicle stuff and any other bits and pieces you're not going to need regularly. Just stick them all in there out the way and it keeps things neat and tidy. A little net on this side and a little bit of a cubby hole here. So all in all, not a bad boot. I think it's fair to say the outside does divide opinion, but there's no getting away from the fact that the build quality out there is exceptional. But when you get in here, you are left in no doubt that you are in a Mercedes, because whilst there's a lot of stuff in here that's very, very familiar to Mercedes drivers, there's something about it that just feels that little bit more special. Let's start off with these screens. And although it's one unit across the middle here, these are actually two screens. The one in front gives you all the information you'd expect, your speed, etc. The one on the left is all your other things, your infotainment systems. And again, if you're a Mercedes driver, you will be used to that infotainment system being the MBUX system. It's been about for a little while now, and it does work. There's no doubt about it, and it looks very, very pretty. Not the simplest system to use, and it's one of those like you find in most cars. I think the only one that you wouldn't say it of nowadays is Tesla. It's very, very easy to get in and pick up their systems. In most cars nowadays, you've got so much information, and we as drivers want so much information. Manufacturers are trying to get it all on there, and they're all doing their own thing about how they set up their menus. It's all there, you get used to it, and it becomes second nature eventually. But to begin with, it can be a little bit daunting. All these sub-menus and different systems to try and navigate your way around. Do you use a touch screen? Do you use this tracker pad here, which is touch sensitive? How do you do it? There's these touch sensitive areas, little squares on the steering wheel. The one on the right controls the right-hand screen. The one on the left controls the left-hand screen. How do you best utilize these screens and how do you navigate your way around? You will work it out for yourself. What I'm trying to say is it just takes a little bit more time than it might do, say, in a Tesla. But all this touching and playing about, all this tactile stuff, it brings me to my one and only real gripe that I have in here. And it's the same in most top-end cars nowadays, not even top-end cars. Why, oh why, do they insist on using this black piano, plasticky, shiny, horrible stuff? I seem to be saying it in almost every video. Especially here, you see in this area here, I would be probably resting my wrist around here to use this tracker pad. If I was a Mercedes driver, I probably wouldn't be wearing a watch that had a sports strap on. I'm sure it would have some buckles on, and I'm sure that would scratch like you wouldn't believe across there. And just the fingerprints and everything else on it. It looks stunning, don't get me wrong. But please, let's have something that is functional and still looks good. There's plenty of other materials out there. And while we're talking materials, this dashboard, I don't know really how to describe it. It's almost like a firm neoprene surface. It feels really nice. It's very, very tactile. It's very, very nice. We've got these shiny areas across here, the steering wheel and the seats. Although these look like leather, they're not. They're fake leather. They're all man-made materials. Everything in here feels really, really high quality. The other great thing in here is the lighting. Now, all round here, you won't be able to see it today. It's a shame we can't do this at night, but at the moment, it's this sort of electric blue lighting all around the doors. Everywhere I look, it is. That lighting changes. I think there's something like 64 different colours, I think, if I remember rightly. The lighting changes, and it can change automatically. So you can tell it what colour you want it to be, but it also senses the mood and how you are in the car. If you're getting tired, if you're wide awake, whatever you're feeling and however you're sat and the environment in this car senses it. And not only does it change the lighting to help improve things, it changes the air conditioning and it changes the fragrance within the car. So it gives you a nice misty light fragrance that maybe wakes you up when you're feeling a bit tired rather than trying to get a coffee. And that can be further enhanced if you wear a Garmin smartwatch. The car can link with that and it can monitor what's going on in your system, what your heart rate's like, how you're feeling. It will talk to the car and it will work out the best way to make this cabin the most energizing and the most appropriate for you to drive in the most alert state, which I think is a really, really nice thing to have. Now, that's not in all the models, obviously, but without using it, I couldn't say for sure if it really does work well, but the idea behind it, I think, is fantastic. So what else can we see in front of us here? Well, we've got our usual array of functions in front of us. I've got a head-up display, which gives me all the information on the screen that I need to know in front of me there. Coming down through here, we got all the different air vents across here in this nice rose gold finish. Maybe not to everybody's taste, but they're subtly done. They're nice. Very, very simple layout for my aircon and heating, all just there in front of me. There's nothing to get confused about there. You know exactly where you are. This big panel here lifts up with a push. You've got 2 cup holders, which if I show you, they're perfectly usable and perfectly safe with a big bottle. Behind that, we've got contactless charging for our phone. Another thing that isn't available on every model, only on the higher end ones. And we've got Apple CarPlay. Again, not available on every option. Which disappoints me. I would have liked to see Apple CarPlay and Android Auto right across the range, but you do have to spend a little bit more than the base model £65,000. Behind that, we've got our touchpad, which controls the screen on the left. I'm always wary of these touchpads. I'm always afraid they don't work very well, but in here, actually, it's very sensitive, it works very well, and you get that haptic kind of feedback from that pad to let you know that you've selected something or you're moving around it. So that's quite easy to use when you're driving. I've got my dynamic range modes on here. If we change the mode, I've got everything from sport to comfort to eco to maximum range. And the maximum range, the car uses all its technology, including its cameras. If we're using the navigation system, it works out what's the best way to drive this car in order to get the maximum amount of range. And it will give you feedback all the time, and it will tell you what you can be doing better in order to improve your range. When it comes to seating position and comfort in here, well, again, this model has got everything you could want. And what I love here is, although it's got the memory and you can set up the seat how you want it, and it will remember that for next time you get in, it's the amount of options you've got to set these seats. And one of the things I often dislike in cars is when you're supposed to sit properly, you need support behind your knees, and you don't get that in all cars. In this one, you've got an extra pad here, which moves backwards and forwards, so you can get it in exactly the right place behind your knees to give you that perfect support. And although it's quite dark in here with the materials that have been used, I've got a nice big sunroof, which lets in plenty of light. Let's see what it's like for people in the back. And back here, well, this is obviously set up for me. I'm 5'9". This is my driving position, and loads of room back here. No problem whatsoever getting in and out. That is more than enough room for me to be happy during the course of a journey to sit here and be very, very comfortable. What I do notice is, again, because of the dark materials that are used, and because we've got this sunroof at the front, there's a lump that finishes about here. That lump is in my eye line, and it makes it feel like the roof is quite low down. The reality is, where you sit, it's actually a bit higher up. Now, I'm not saying if you're well over 6 foot that would be high enough, because there's not an awful lot of room, maybe an inch above my head. But this is comfortable for where I am, and let's be honest, we all slouch a bit in the back of the car, so it's probably a bit more room than like when we normally do these tests and we sit bolt upright and we try and put our head up against the roof. That's not reality, is it? We all slump down and we all get nice and comfortable. The general theme continues back here, and it is one of general quality, I have to say. Even these seat pockets are very nicely made. We see the same fake leather across the back with this suede insert, and it is comfortable. In the middle here, I've got a armrest which opens up to reveal a nice cubby area. No cup holders there though, and if I look around, those doors just about might hold one. But what is nice, and you don't often see this in new cars, this whole centre seat comes down, so you've got this slide through bit. If you had something long, skis for example, you could put those in the boot without opening the whole lot up. My only criticism back here is these air vents. My word, they look tacky, and especially in the context of the rest of this car. These are little plastic things that kind of move about with a knob that opens and closes them. They are awful. They don't belong in here at all, and I don't like those. They should have done a bit more with that. But if that's my only criticism, then I think this car is doing pretty well. The first thing that you notice when you get in this car and you start driving is just how quiet it is. Even for an electric car, this car is really, really quiet. I can hardly hear any wind noise. I can hear a bit of road noise. It's quite a good road I'm on at the moment, to be fair. But there's nothing else. And what you really notice when you're used to driving electric cars, you often hear that whine of the electric motor. You don't hear that in here. It is a very, very nice car to be in, and a very, very laid back. The other thing I've noticed is that because you can see the bonnet, it almost like a bit of a bulbous that comes up in front of me, it feels quite long in front, but looking around it feels quite compact and quite narrow. This car's actually almost identical in size to the Jaguar I-Pace. I think it's about 10 centimetres longer, but other than that, it's almost identical all the way around. And let's get it out of the way. That one thing we all want to know is what the speed's like. Of course, I'll tell you all about the stats in a minute, but if I pop this in sport mode, and check there's nobody around me and put my foot down. Yeah, that's what you expect. It's like all electric cars, it's instant pickup, and even that from, I think I was at 50 to 60 there, it's instantaneous. It's there, it's easy for an overtake, and it's very, very usable power. What you sometimes find in cars is that it's just unmanageable. Well, this, no, you can control it. It's all right. Let's get back into comfort where we belong, eh? So this car has an 85 kilowatt hour battery, of which 80 is usable. It produces 402 horsepower, which it drives predominantly the front wheels. So there's a motor in the front and a motor in the back. All the power goes to the front wheels until you ask a bit more of it, or the computer trickery inside it decides it needs a little bit of power going to the rear wheels, and then it adjusts it and throws some to the back. But that's quite unusual, certainly in these high-end German luxury cars. Normally they are rear wheel predominantly driven, and the front is just to balance things out. So whether that changes the handling characteristics, well, I'll let you be the judge of that. But what I can say is it feels extremely balanced. It's an SUV. This isn't a sports car. It does, as you go into corners, you do feel a certain amount of roll. I'm not going to say it's wallowy or anything else, but you do feel a certain amount of roll. Top speed in this thing is 111 miles an hour. It's 0 to 60 in 4.9 seconds. That's quite ridiculous when you consider this is a, what, 2.5 ton vehicle. That is really, really quick. And because of that weight, obviously we're not going to see the efficiency that we see in some of the other electric cars that we've driven. So you're going to look at maybe 220 to 250 miles per charge. Certainly the owner of this car, I see from the last reset, it's done 795 miles, and he's been averaging 2.7 miles per kilowatt hour, which is what I've been reading. Anything from 2.3 to just under 3 miles per kilowatt hour seems to be what you can get from this car. Now, I know that the owner of this car, he's quite an efficient driver, so 2.7 I would say is quite good. Now, view-wise, it's pretty good looking forward. I've got my head-up display, which means I don't have to look down, and the dashboard itself is quite low, so there's nothing really breaking my eye line, albeit because of the size of the screens, it's really easy to see when I look down. But that head-up display does work. Otherwise, left and right are good views. Behind, it's not as good. I can see the cars behind, but because of I suppose the aerodynamics of the roof of the car, you can see that real concaved look to it, and it brings in that rear view. So it's almost framed the car behind, but I can't see an awful lot more. But that's okay, because if I'm reversing, the reversing camera on this car is really, really good. And not only do you get the view behind, you get that view from above as well. So you can really see what's around you. And what about driving characteristics? Well, this is an electric car, so one of the things that is really different is the regenerative braking. I've got flappy pedals behind my steering wheel here that allow me to adjust just how harsh that is and how much charge goes back into the battery when I lift off. If I go to the full regen, it's very harsh. It really does bring this car to a stop. It's that one pedal driving that we hear about. Obviously I can change and adapt that to my environment. I like that one pedal driving around the town. Out on the open road I like a little bit less. I like to be able to allow it just to freewheel a little bit more. And also in this car I've got that adaptive cruise control. It's an extra, but that does work very, very well. Being a high-end car, of course, this has got voice control in it, and I have never found a car yet that has actually worked. I just bypass it all the time. But let's see what this one's like. Mercedes.
How may I help you?
Turn on back massager.
I'm switching on the massage.
Oh, and that worked, so that was good. Let's try another one. Mercedes.
How may I help you?
Navigate to Manchester.
I am starting route guidance to Manchester.
So there you go, it actually does work in here, which has amazed me because normally they never work for me and I'm going over and over again before I get annoyed and just give up. But, well, I suppose there's no excuse nowadays, is there, with Google Assistant and Amazon Alexa? Voice recognition really should be working in cars, especially of this quality. One of the things I mentioned before is that this car is very much based on the GLC platform. Now, they really have re-engineered it. But the problem with this being based on that platform is that there are a few little things in here that are very, very similar to that. It's not all bad. Things like the central console here, that's all very, very similar. But it's more the advantages you get from having an electric vehicle built from the ground up that you don't get in here. And one of those big advantages is that the battery sits very much under the floor and you don't need a transmission tunnel through the centre of the vehicle to allow the rear wheels to drive. Well, you've still got that lump in here just behind me in the back, which means that although the back seats are a decent size, that middle one, it isn't as usable as we see in some of the other purely designed from the ground up electric vehicles. So there's one or two little things that clearly Mercedes are trying to break into that electric vehicle market, and they want to lead the way, and there's no reason why they can't. I mean, I'm blown away with how good this cabin is in here. But until they actually build a vehicle from the ground up that is designed to be electric, I don't think that we will see their full potential. That said, these are minor points, and I'm only picking up on those minor points because this is a premium car. This car is nearly £80,000, and for £80,000 I want near perfection. I'm not far away, but I could see how they could have made this just a little bit better. So it's time to give you my final opinion on this car, and well, I could tell you that when I looked at the iPace, I preferred the interior to it. There was just a bit more to do and a bit more interest in there. I could tell you that Tesla make more efficient drivetrains. They're able to go further with less energy. But ultimately, the package that this car offers, I think, is far superior to both of those vehicles. Now, it's not to say that I maybe wouldn't choose the iPace over it. It comes down to personal preference, of course it does. But what I can tell you is the interior of this car is probably the best built and the best materials that I've ever seen in an electric vehicle. I am blown away with just how good the quality of that car is inside. For a car of this size and weight, the efficiency is very, very good. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. I don't think you can expect very much more. I think if I was looking, I would be disappointed that the base model doesn't have things like Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. I think that's an essential nowadays that should just come as standard in all cars. I think I would probably play about with the options list, maybe not go for this top end one, maybe go for an AMG one, which I like the front of slightly better. But this is nitpicking. This is things that are personal preferences. Have a look across the range. Which one would you choose? Do you think that this top of the range, all singing, all dancing one is the way to go? You get your best value for money? Or would you be happy with the bottom of the range one, as much as you can call £65,000 bottom of the range? But would you be happy with that? Has that got everything in it you want and you think anything beyond that's a waste of money? Let me know. But to conclude, I think this is an incredible car. And if Mercedes can build an electric vehicle on a platform that isn't designed for an electric vehicle and come up as well as this with just those few little things that I spoke about before, then I think the future for Mercedes and electric vehicles is extremely bright, and I cannot wait to see the next EQ that they bring into production. So that's it for today. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. Hopefully you've enjoyed being in and around this car just as much as I have. If you have, remember to like and share. If you're not doing so already, subscribe to the channel. Until next time, you take care. I will see you soon.